Out of the blue, two friends decided to be bold and spontaneous. In 2017, they hopped on a plane, flew across the seas, and landed in Cuba. Once they got there, they stumbled on an old oil factory that was converted into a multi-sensory space, and they went from room to room, exploring almost every art form imaginable.
And they soon recognized that there was something different going on here. They saw that one space could be multidisciplinary, and not only could it be creative, but it could actually influence changing culture.
They hopped back on a plane, came back to Memphis, and for the next 2 years, traveled domestically and internationally in seek of this same experience.
And what they found every time they came back to Memphis was that they were really inspired, but had no clue what to do. And so they recognized that maybe, just maybe, they were crazy enough to do it, to actually see an immersive experience in the Deep South. So, I'm Ebony.
I'm Carissa, and we're MEMFOLK, a creative, pause for applause, a creative duo capturing urban folklore in unimaginable ways. We are those two friends, but our story is not necessarily unique, so we're excited to share our journey to MEMFOLK. So this is a huge picture of our face. Wow, now seeing it up here, I'm like a little obnoxious, sorry about that. But yeah, so I think we gave a little bit of a preview in the panel about our backgrounds and our experiences, being born and raised in the South, being connected in a city. So we moved to Memphis independent of each other. We had no idea that each other existed, and then we got connected through creative spaces and our own art forms. And through that is where that bold idea in 2017 came, to just travel the world and see what was out there, not knowing what we were going to encounter.
Yeah, and I think it's really important as we kind of speak more to our backgrounds to recognize that honestly we had no clue that this community, that this room, that this industry existed. And so I just want to say really quick, like, this feels like home. And we are really grateful to be here and to learn from you and soak it up. And so thank you for that. But I think it's good for us to delve a little bit into our backgrounds, because what we once saw as a disadvantage, I think, is actually a huge advantage, not only for this industry, but for the first immersive experience that we did.
So thank you to the presenters who were up earlier that mentioned imposter syndrome, because this slide was created for that very reason. We were like, oh, we gotta like have our credentials, because they're gonna be like, who are these girls? But it's true, like we had to start owning that our background might not be from a traditional like artist space, but they are so valuable in this community. And so this was a part of our pitch deck. I think somebody else mentioned that before, because in the spaces where we operate now in the South, it is still very new, this whole immersive experience, this immersive economy. And so we have to kind of lead with the fact that we have a business background, nonprofit management, like we have all these things that feed into a business that just so happens to be creative and uplifting the arts. And I think that's helped us kind of overcome imposter syndrome, but also, to Ebony's point, what we thought was a disadvantage of not coming from a structured discipline of artwork is actually working out in our favor. I don't know if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, so we'll go into really our 32,000 plus mile journey. So like Carissa said, we traveled for almost 3 years, nationally, internationally, because we became, if I can say, quite obsessed with immersive experiences. I think you have to really kind of be a radical person to even want to delve into this industry. And so we wanted to know, like, what was out there, like who is out there, and so that really led to us taking our time, taking our money, and traveling.
And this image up here is, I mean, pretty much pop culture. It's the Yayoi Kusama exhibit that started touring from DC to Seattle. It was a phenomenal exposure to, I used the term pop culture, but my experience in that space was that she was a woman who created from her culture, and it became well-loved, well-received, and well-accepted. And that, to me, was revolutionary, that she could just be who she was and tell her story, and people grafted towards it. And so, grafted towards her concept. So I actually booked 2 tickets. I went one day just to explore, because we're very much so intentional about when we're in the space, it's not just to capture the moment. Sometimes you can lose, the benefit of being in the space fully. So I booked a spot to just explore, and then I came back the next day and got some good photos. But that's my creative process, if I can share it.
Yeah, I will say, we used to be fashion bloggers, so all these places that we used to go, it initially started out as this will be really cool content, and then it turned into actually let's go back and start studying what they're doing. Yeah. And so I think what's really good to call out is that we started out in traditional art spaces. So we were like, let's see what this museum has as a really cool exhibit. And then we just went down a rabbit hole. And I just remember going to Buku Arts Fest as a media representative. My background is actually managing large-scale public art projects, so sculptures, murals, the whole jam. And recognizing that, okay, there is actually site-specific locations where you can have art and music and people collide, where they just really kind of transform themselves. And I don't know if you guys have heard of the book, The Experience Economy, but it kind of became our guiding force when we didn't know that this existed. And so it really helped us create a guideline for recognizing that what we were really looking for was transformation. What is going to be the thing that absolutely transforms us and we're never the same?
Fully. So let's go back to the experience that we mentioned in Cuba. This place is called Fábrica de Arte. These were the only pictures. We were laughing putting this together because we were so excited about this space. We had no idea what we were booking or getting into. We were so excited about this space that we really didn't take photos. And so I guess you'll just have to go to Cuba and Havana to see it. That's an invitation for you all to experience it yourself. But what was really interesting about this story is the sort of experience layer, because again, there are multiple rooms, multiple ways to interact with the space, but it was, of course, founded by an Afro-Cuban artist who wanted to create this space for other artists of color. And the weekend we were there just so happened to be the same weekend of World Jazz Fest. And this was a private set that they were doing in this small room. And so we didn't know until afterwards when we ran into the bass player, and he was like, y'all had no idea? And we were like, no, but y'all sound great on the stage. But it was really great because that layered experience, I mean, they were still relatable, willing to talk to us and just talk a little bit about their experience with Fábrica de Arte. And it was what kickstarted our journey, because we're like, okay, if this is in Cuba, if this space lives and exists here, we can't afford international trips every month. So let's start, thinking about what's in the States and what we can accomplish there.
Yeah, and so these are just some other experiences that we went to. There's Dream Machine in Brooklyn, and we went there, I think, one year for my birthday. And just, once again, just immersing ourselves kind of in the industry, getting to know what was out there. But I think there is also this piece that is extremely important to us, is that we didn't want to experience immersive spaces or site-specific locations as a form of escapism. I think we had recognized that there's actually a lot of substance that could be had in these spaces. And so one thing of just growing up in Mississippi, Carissa in Alabama, but us being kind of central and meeting in Memphis, was that we started to recognize that there are certain threads that are true for the Southern experience that we didn't really see in the spaces that we went to. And so we were like, man, these are great. These inspire us. These, allow us to imagine, but we didn't feel that depth and that connection to who we were and to just really the environments that we had grown up with.
Yeah, and that's where we mentioned earlier about like the transformative experience. I think once you get exposed to that, then you're always chasing like that high, that natural high, for lack of better words. And so we realized that, okay, if these spaces, it was pretty obvious that we probably weren't their target demographic. And I say that because a lot of even their marketing materials weren't reflective of us, but I mean, we weren't gonna ask permission to be there. We were just gonna go. But it was like, what would it look like if we thought about that at the beginning? That's why I mentioned before, I love Sina's talk and all this talk about just thinking through at the forefront. Like, what does it look like to create spaces that are welcoming for diverse communities and revolutionary, design for them first? Because if you do that, you're actually opening up an opportunity to reach a broader market. And one of the concepts that we kind of coined into our work was called designing for the fringe. And it's when you create these immersive experiences, or when you create these opportunities where you're designing for populations that might not be central, you are actually solving world problems. Like, it's not necessarily something that's unique or new, but it was just amazing to us that it wasn't being thought through at that point. And so that's where we were like, okay, if we don't see it, we gonna be it. That's my Southern accent, is it? We gonna be it. So this is where it started with a little bit more back about that imposter syndrome. We were like, okay, well, we need to like be an artist to be accepted in this space. So we got to create things, we got to pull stuff together, we got to make stuff with our hands. And we actually really enjoyed this part of the work because, I mean, you can't skip these steps when you're talking about being in this economy. It builds credibility, but also it just builds like a practice. But again, we were coming from business background, nonprofit, education. And so we were just like, you know what, let's start testing what we can do in the space. And so we created, again, this is like a walk down memory lane for us. We created this wonderfully sweet, tiny exhibit in this space called Crosstown Arts in Memphis. We went to like the Home Depots and we got as much supplies as we could. But we were like, what do we create that might hint at a urban experience that might, if someone walks into the space, being very intentional about when we were creating, how do we want them to feel? What do we want them to say? Like, how do we want them to interact in the space without knowing the vocabulary? So this space has been wonderful to start putting like, you know, agency and all these terms to what we were doing. But when we were thinking about our customer journey, we'll talk a little bit more about it later with the other iterations, but we're like, how do we want people to interact with our art? So I'll let you talk through this one. Or explain what it is.
Yeah, so this is called Untitled, and in a lot of urban communities, you may see like, you know, shoes thrown over, you know, light lines, power lines, and usually that speaks to the passing or the death of that person, and that's their shoes kind of thrown over the power lines. And I just remember like seeing it one day, looking up at the sky, but it was so beautiful. And that really kind of became like our practice without us knowing that it was our practice, or more so our design process of how do we take kind of everyday life and subvert it into something unimaginable, subvert it into something that actually can be a conduit for joy, for inspiration, for imagination. And we recognized that we didn't want to be just artists. We were like, man, we're not gonna make any money. And that's important to us, and I say that because we wanted to create impact. And a lot of times impact in real ways that can enact real change takes capital. And we wanted to be in a position where we could actually provide that for communities that we care about.
Absolutely. So this was a video projection of it was a video that Ebony took. It was a video projection. And of course, these are 3 fringe pillars because that was a reminder to us to keep designing for the fringe. And so we incorporate fringe in a lot of our concepts. It's not necessarily apparent to the user or the viewer, but it's our reminder to like keep going for the work that we're doing. And so through this experience, we got connected to sort of the less of the creative. This was more so for the creative community. We got connected to the business ecosystem within Memphis. And so there was a pitch competition that they put together where they were looking for, you know, different type of creative entrepreneurs. And so we put together a pitch for a large-scale immersive experience that literally was like the ideal or genesis of us going through this whole process in 2017. And we just were carrying it in the background. We pitched the idea at the Urban Pitch Summit. Do you want to talk about the amount, which was great, but we were aggressive with our goal. We knew that it would take capital, so we said,
Aggressive, like $1.4 million aggressive.
and without smiling, we need $1.4 million. We won the competition, but they only had $2,000. But we were so excited to win the competition. We took that $2,000 and we were like, you know what? We're gonna do what we can with this $2,000, and we're gonna make it as unimaginable as we can. But another beautiful part of that story was that not only did and it was great because the grant was community funded, so we like pitched to an audience and they had to vote and actually give their money towards this cause, and then that was a part of like the grant. And so we were like identifying our users at the beginning. But also connected us with the business community to where they were like, hey, we don't have this huge space that you got your eyes on, because we have our eyes on this property in Memphis that is, it's just too perfect for the concept that we have. They're like, we don't have this, but we've got a shipping container, and you can do whatever you want with it. And we were, again, just like, yes, please, and thank you.
And so that led to our first immersive experience that opened, if you can see, June 2020. So smack dab, not only in the pandemic, but during lockdown, so awesome. And I think a lot of times, I think what we learned from this experience was that when there's a lack of resources, or maybe there are some external challenges, that's actually where innovation and ingenuity peak its head in, and it's for you to grab it and take that moment. And so we actually still saw it as an advantage to be in a shipping container during the pandemic, because we could have a socially distanced immersive experience for people to have during one of the most, difficult seasons in a lot of our lifetimes.
For sure. And then on top of that, there was, of course, the height of civil unrest, and there was a lot of just grief in our communities. And so it was very important for us to create a space of joy and to create a safe space, because when you're in a safe space, you can be silly. So when we know that our users are being silly, it's because they've sort of distanced themselves, not from escapism, but just appreciating somebody thought through this. So these are some of the photos through our shipping container. Just a quick point, so the space itself was called Box Lot. It was a micro retail experience, 3 shipping containers. There were 2 other Black-owned businesses operating the other ones. So their goal was to get foot traffic in the space, not just for our concept, which was a paid activity or a paid experience, but also as a byproduct, they were shopping at these local stores, which I thought was really cool and a part of our business model of driving traffic into and building better Black businesses. So these are some of the photos from our wonderful shipping container. So we decided to just play on Box Lot. So we had 3 iterations. They switched out every month. So we started with Flower Box. So when you walked into the space, it was literally like these walls, but with physical materials. So we didn't have the digital projections. We built that space. After that was Skybox. And so we wanted people to walk into Cloud 9 and live their life, as if they're on Cloud 9. And then the final one was Gift Box, because it was the anniversary of the space, and so they wanted to have a party theme. But aside from that, again, back to our intention of we need to make sure that we talk about how we want people to interact with our space. So while we're building, we're joking it'll be so awesome if someone got married here, or if a grown man is giggling in the back. We were talking about these things, and then we would be in the space and they would literally happen. And that's where we start getting chills, when you're intentional in your customer journey and design. This is Dwayne and Erica.
Oh my God.
They got married in our space, y'all.
And I don't know if this shows up for you guys, but because it was a micro experience, a lot of our kind of first-time customers became friends of ours, people we still keep in touch with. They have a newborn babe now, and it's so cool. There's up above is Shelby, and she was actually such a champion for us and really kind of starting that marketing and advertising for us. And that's a huge thing that I just want to call out is that we leveraged other organizations, other businesses to help tell our story because we recognize that we maybe didn't have the funding that the large-scale experiences that we saw did.
Absolutely. So we're leaving you with this. Another part of that was collaborating with local artists and paying them for their work. So we had Maya Sain, who is, they are phenomenal. They're working with Skittles and Crocs now, but before we were just like, we love your work. So they created this print for us. We sold it in the space. We had different iterations of it. So we always try to partner with artists of color to give them profitable opportunities. And we don't have time to talk about what's next, but we do want to drop our contact information up on the screen. So if you want to talk to us, have those conversations, get at us, literally.
Please do.
Get at MEMFOLK.com. We would love to have a conversation with you to talk about our long-term vision, some of the things that we hinted at before of where we're headed with MEMFOLK. But
yeah, with that, thank you guys.
thank you so much.
Give it up for MEMFOLK, Risa Hogan and Ebony Andrews.
Awesome.